What's up everybody and welcome to another edition of AGR's Pop Culture Reviews. And I'm gonna get right to the point on this one. Somebody at Hello Games owes me a freaking explanation. What the hell happened? Now some of the things we're gonna talk about here are not things that haven't already been said by 1,000 other reviewers. And they have legitimate points. The reason that it took me so long to get this review out is because I really wanted to give this game a chance. And the 40 plus hours that I put into this game, I can't believe I did that, was freaking excruciatingly brutal. Now, I will give credit where credit is due, and what Hello Games has accomplished here is pretty extraordinary in terms of the scope of this world and this universe that they've created, but that's about it. Now, I do have to say this, there's not much in the way of narrative in No Man's Sky, and you really don't know what your ultimate goal is except to get to the center of the universe. And when you emerge in this world, you're essentially stranded on a planet that is one of 18 quintillion planets in this universe, which in and of itself is very impressive. So what that all boils down to is that every single person that plays this game will end up on a planet that no other player is going to end up on or start off from, which is pretty freaking awesome when you think about it. At least conceptually, on paper, it's pretty awesome. But that's also part of the problem of this game. Now, the way that Hello Games marketed this title was essentially that, yeah, there are other players in this universe, but you'll never actually meet because it's so big. And again, back to what I was saying before, that's part of the freaking problem. I mean, this is a huge universe, and I can only imagine how awesome this would be if you had other players in this universe to help you along with missions, to gather resources, to build settlements. I mean, all of those things would be freaking amazing. Unfortunately, there's none of that here. Now, one of the things that I learned very quickly about this game is that this was essentially a freaking resource management simulator. You're walking around and you're gathering resources first to build your ship, because again, you're stranded and you have to fix your ship. So you're walking around and you're trying to get these resources from a rock or a tree, and I realized, oh my, this is getting really repetitive, and this happened very early on in the game. That's why it's astonishing that I did this and continued doing this for about 40 plus hours. Now, the exploration aspect of this game is fantastic in that you do have a lot of variety in places that you can go to, planets that you can visit. There's a lot of diversity in terms of the fauna and the wildlife, but after a while I did notice that a lot of the wildlife, or a lot of the creatures and critters that you see along the way, look like hybrids or mutations. It looks like these procedurally generated creatures really didn't have much in terms of character design. They look like something that you would have found in The Thing, something that John Carpenter would have made up, and a lot of times they was just weird looking. Another aspect of exploring and running into the wildlife is that if nobody's explored a planet before, you can actually name it, and you can actually catalog a lot of the wildlife, but I gotta tell you, that gets boring very quickly. As I mentioned before, this game seemed like one big inventory management simulator, and a very big problem with that is that the inventory management itself is not very intuitive, especially in the slots that you have. You're limited to so many slots, and then you have to kind of decide what you're going to throw away, what you no longer need. And I kept encountering some parts in the game where there's something that I actually needed and I had to end up discarding it a long time ago, and then I had to go look for it again, and it was such a pain in the ass. Another thing that was really jarring for me is, for as enormous as this universe is, and they touted it as being this gargantuan thing, it's completely devoid of life. And the interactions that you have with the aliens, some of them are traders, you can buy and sell from them, but it's such a hollow experience. A lot of the times you don't understand what they're saying, and communications between the two of you really amount to just gibberish. It's supposed to be alien tongue, but it doesn't mean anything. There's no codex for it. Granted, along the way you do discover these kind of monoliths that help you to, decode some of the languages of the aliens, but you know what? I never found it enough to want to do that, and after doing it like maybe half a dozen times, it got so tedious that I just said the hell with this, I'm not going to do it anymore. There's no payoff. Another major problem with this game is that you do have a weapon of sorts, if you can call it that. Now, this weapon is used not only in the very limited and very shallow gunplay, if you actually ever get to use this thing, but it also helps you procure your resources. Now, this in and of itself is a bit of a flaw, and I found myself running away from any kind of engagements with the local bots or the local machines that attack you sometimes, and they're really overpowered. I mean, they will gang up on you and they will freaking hand you your ass. And because the gameplay is not up to par and it just doesn't have the mechanics of a first-person shooter would, you really try to avoid it at all costs, and that's a real shame. I will say this about No Man's Sky: it is a very good looking game, and by that I mean it's pretty to look at, and it gives you a nice panoramic from the cockpit. When you're looking at planets, or when you're looking at the surface of the planets, they look really good. Yes, they're not ultra photorealistic and it's highly stylized, but that's what they were going for, and in that perspective, when you're looking at it from that way, from that angle, it actually is pretty good. I also have to say I was very impressed with the distances between the planets and the galaxies. I remember when I first took flight and I was on my way to another planet, I was looking at the kilometers that I had to travel to the other planet, and they were astronomical. And the first time I hit the hyperdrive was pretty exhilarating. You know, just knowing that I had so many millions of kilometers to get to the planet was pretty cool, and I really liked that component of it. But again, for every great step forward that No Man's Sky takes, it takes 3 steps back in the wrong direction. Spaceflight gets very, very boring. And what they advertise at these massive battles, that you would run into armadas and different factions would be fighting each other in space in these huge battles, yeah, none of that shit happens here. And it was so disappointing. After a while, you get to feel like you're the only one traveling these vast distances to get to these planets, and you feel so isolated. Now, this is not a Metro game. You're not meant to feel that isolated. I wanted to see a galaxy that was alive, that was vibrant, and you just don't get that here. After a while, you start to lose your motivation in terms of your ultimate goal of reaching the center of the universe, and I'll be quite honest with you guys. After those 40 plus hours, I just didn't want to do it anymore. It got tedious, it got repetitive, it got to the point where I was no longer having a good time. Even that sense of exploration that I naturally have inside me was slowly diminishing, and after a while, it was just a fleeting afterthought. To be honest with you, I stopped playing the game and I just YouTubed what happened at the center of the universe. And I gotta say, for those of you who have already played the game, it was so freaking disappointing, and I'm glad that I didn't carry on through the whole time to get what we got, essentially. There was definitely a miscommunication to what the expectations were for this game and how they actually presented this to the public. Now, I don't know if it was just a misstep from Hello Games or just their advertising campaign didn't really understand what they had. Either way, a lot of players and a lot of game owners were very disappointed with this title, myself included. As of today, I just found out that the Advertising Standards Authority, or the ASA, is launching an official inquiry into whether or not No Man's Sky, Hello Games, and Valve misrepresented their video game and what the expectation was to the public. According to one online source, Rock Paper Shotgun, the ASA has compiled a list of ways in which they believe No Man's Sky's advertising is underrepresented, and they were actually providing a full list. And this is a real shame, because I'm a very strong proponent of really helping and supporting independent game developers so that we're not plagued with the same IPs every year and the god-awful sequels. We need new and fresh ideas, and this can only set that back if there's a lot of backlash, especially with independent developers, that, you know, a lot of times might go under with a little bit of bad press. Nevertheless, my personal feelings aside about wanting to support independent game developers, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give my honest opinion about these games. And unfortunately, No Man's Sky just fell a little short. Even if you put the hype aside, it's still, the gameplay is very shallow, it's highly repetitive, it feels tedious at times, and I gotta tell you, it's really boring too. You know, if I ever had a problem with insomnia, this game would cure it, and I hate that I have to say that, because I really wanted to like this title. I will say this in its defense though, what they have here, at least structurally, is a great foundation. If they can just build upon it, and live up to some of the things that they promised in their initial advertisements, This could be a spectacular title, and I'm really interested in seeing what happens with No Man's Sky in the future. I guess only time will tell, but you know, if they just improve it just a little bit, just tweak it just a little bit, it could be something great. Let's see. Alright guys, so that's my official review on No Man's Sky. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews.